Good evening. My name is Pasha Mahmood. I'm from the National University of Singapore. I have been here for 25 years and I'm originally from Bangladesh. You see that green part. I left Bangladesh when I was 18 and then I went all the way to the United States. I was there for 12 years and then I came to Singapore. And after for about 12 years in Singapore, I went to Switzerland to teach in a business school called IMD. For after 2 years in IMD, I came back to Singapore because my wife didn't like Switzerland. And after that, now I work with, most of my work is with students and with companies, and I also do some research on innovation in emerging markets. So today what I'm going to talk about is very close to what I do, also in terms of research and also in terms of my work with companies. Now, I want you to take a look at this. This is why I came back to Asia after 12 years in the US. If you look at this, what do you see? If you move from left to right, you see that most of the consumption share of the consumer class is actually moving from different shades of purple to different shades of yellow and brown. I want you to think for a second what it means actually. Because what it means is if most of your current customers are coming from different shades of purple or green, as we move from left to right, in the future, there is really no future for you. So unless you get customers from those yellow and different shades of brown and yellow, basically you wouldn't be able to grow. So this is one of the main reasons for us to focus on Asia. But I also want you to think about this quote by Thomas Friedman. So it's a kind of a sensational quote, so I kind of like it. When I was growing up, my parents told me, finish your dinner. People in China and India are starving. I tell my daughters, finish your homework. People in India and China are starving for your job. The reason I put this slide is because for you to think that it's not just where your customers will be coming from. Think about companies. Think about American companies, Japanese companies. Think about Toyota. Toyota is the leading car manufacturer today. But about 70 years ago, was it the leading automaker? No. For 70 years from now, would it be? There is no guarantee. So when we look at Asia, I want you to understand, it's not just where your customers will be coming from, this is also where your competitors will be coming from. So this is a great opportunity for anyone who could actually be able to solve those to those India, China, and different parts of Asia. But not just India, not just China. I want you to understand that because when we talk about Asia, we forget there are other countries other than India and China too. For example, Indonesia. Indonesia is going to add about 75.8 million people in terms of the middle class in the coming decade. Pakistan, 60 million people. Bangladesh, my country, about 60 million people. Philippines, about 40 million people. So if you think about this, it's important to understand that India and China are there, but there are lots of other countries in Asia potentially growing. So these are not small countries. Look at the size. Look at the number of middle class coming. So it's not just India or China. The problem is, we all understand that we have to win in these markets, but it's not easy. Now you understand that Uber came to Asia with all this fanfare, but they lost in Southeast Asia and they lost in China. So it is not easy. Now, what is the main problem? First thing is, it's not the same purchasing power. The customers in emerging Asia do not have the same purchasing power. Now, what does that mean? Now, this is a photo from Cambodia. In Cambodia, middle income earners are classed as anyone who earns between $500 and $2,000 a month. Now, somebody earning $500 a month would not be considered middle class in Singapore. But it is not just about the purchasing power. It's not the same needs. So I want you to take a look at this picture. What do you see? So here, this photo is taken from the second largest city in Myanmar, Mandalay. they are doing operation using flashlights from mobile phones. Why are they using flashlights? Because they have load shedding. What is load shedding? Some of you, if you happen to be from my part of the world, you would know that when you have tremendous demand for electricity, but the supply of electricity is limited, you have to redistribute the supply. So some parts of the place would have electricity, others wouldn't. So you have regular these kind of things, and this is really a problem right now in places like South Africa currently. Now, in those kind of places, you need to have mobile phones which have strong flashlights. Now, I want you to understand what it means. Think about the COVID that we just had this pandemic, right? AstraZeneca's vaccine is cheaper than Pfizer's and Moderna's and doesn't require super cold temperature. Now, what does that mean? Let's say Bill Gates, in one of his charitable moments, decided to give everybody free vaccines, free malarial vaccines, free all kinds of vaccines. But let's say those vaccines need to be refrigerated at a very cold temperature. If you don't have electricity, all of this would be completely lost. So even if somebody gives you free vaccine, if it is not really robust to the atmosphere infrastructure, it has no value. So you have to think about the needs customers have within the context they have. So the challenge is how to provide 80% value at 10% of the price. So this is the first question. If you want to grow in this part of the world, it's 80% value at 10% of the price. Now, I want to give an example of Samsung in India. When Samsung came to India in the early 2000s, Nokia had the market share. It has about 70 to 80% of the market. And people thought that basically Nokia was mobile phone. So when Samsung was trying to compete with Nokia, it really initially couldn't make any traction. Then they came up with a very interesting idea. They said in order to increase market share, Samsung wanted to come up with something that would give people with limited affordability the opportunity to enjoy some of the benefits of smartphone at a price for feature phones. In 2007, quite some time from now, Samsung was the first company in India to offer full touchscreen feature phone. These full touchscreen phones were not smartphones, but they looked very much like a smartphone. So actually, I wanted to see how they look like. This is how they look like. So this was fully touchscreen. So it looks like a smartphone, and it has pre-installed apps, and it has an operating system where you could put some apps, but it is not a smartphone like the way your smartphone is, where you can customize it. It doesn't have that kind of capacity. It has long-lasting batteries, flashlights, high-quality speakers, single-touch speakerphone, dual SIM, Bluetooth, downloadable apps. Now, if you look at these things, it's not a smartphone, it's not a feature phone, it's a smart feature phone. So how do you give people something that is aspirational? Now, this allowed Samsung to be the most popular phone brand until Xiaomi came. Xiaomi was able to bring back the price at about, so Samsung was selling those phones for $60 to $70, so Xiaomi was able to do for $120. Expensive, but still a lot cheaper than the smartphones at that time. And the market basically moved from feature phones to smartphone. So Xiaomi became the #1 phone maker in India. Until just recently, about last year, a couple of months ago, what happened was Samsung came up with mobile phones, which was about $300 smartphones. And these smartphones are basically a little more expensive, a little nicer than the Xiaomi smartphones. Xiaomi kept itself basically locked in very basic smartphones, whereas Samsung, they came up with smartphones which were a little bit more, little nicer. So there is some kind of a premiumization going on in India, and Samsung took over the market. So you have to understand, it's not so much about features, it's about value. So the first thing I want you to understand is that if you want to grow in these markets, you have to think about value innovation. Now, what is value innovation? Value innovation means thinking beyond features and focusing on customer benefit and value. Features mean nothing. It's what customers are willing to pay. Delete, diminish, enhance, and add features. Delete the features which has no value. Think about trying to sell to Singapore, where I work, buildings which have excellent earthquake resistance capacity, but Singapore doesn't have earthquake. So you have to think about what is it that you can safely take out. You have to think about what are the features you have to add in, because in the context of their need, they may have certain needs that nobody has ever thought about. This is something I really want you to understand, because a lot of these phones, a lot of these appliances, a lot of these things, even medical equipments, are made in countries for people whose needs are actually very different from yours. And this is not just about coming to emerging Asia. I don't know if you know that oximeters, the pandemics, we had to use oximeters to check if the blood oxygen level is as a certain level. If it goes below a certain level, we have to go to hospital. Now, I don't know if you know that actually for oximeters, it is likely to show, if your skin color is darker, like mine, it will show that I have blood oxygen level which is right, but actually it is overstating. So if I'm going to hospital and somebody else who has a paler skin going to hospital, it will show that my blood oxygen level is right, but actually it could be much lower. So I would be turned down from the hospital where I should be going to the hospital. Why? It's not that somebody was intentionally being discriminatory to me, but because the samples that were used to make these, they were not people like me. And this is not just about people like me. I don't know if you know, for things like knee surgery or things like certain kind of chest surgery, the rate of success for women is a lot lower than men. Why is that? Because most of the people who have gone through these kind of randomized control trials are mostly women, mostly men. So it is the same idea. So most of the products are actually meant for different set of customers. So the first thing, you have to actually respect your customers. We have been talking about a lot, that we want to sell to Indians, we want to sell to Indonesians, we want to sell to Chinese, but we are not going to make anything for them. We are going to basically make something for Germans, Americans, and we expect everybody else to buy. So that's not going to work. So take away the things that people have no need for. By taking away, you can actually have the opportunity to add things that they are willing to pay for. So if you do that, remember, low cost is not necessarily low margins, because you can sell a lot. It doesn't mean low quality, because appropriate features are there. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So you're solving people's problems. It is not cheap imitation. It's the real innovation. It's solving problems. And it is not unbranded. You just brand it differently. Now, this is an example of a brand called 𝐻𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐧. It's a Chinese manufacturer called Transsion, which has never sold a single phone inside China. But it is the fastest growing and the most popular phone brand in many parts of Africa. Now, if you look at this, why is it that people are really trying to buy these 𝐻𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐧 phones? Because they have long-lasting batteries. Why is it important? Because they may not have electricity all the time. That's why battery becomes important. Good for taking selfies. Stable connection when signal is poor, and affordable, less than $60. So this is an example of value innovation. Also, take a look at this picture. I always show this picture, and I ask my students, what is it that they see? So different people say different things. Some people say happy family. I would say this is really an example of happy family. Some people will say it's dangerous. I once showed this to my Egyptian friend, and he said the picture is almost the same in Egypt, with one big difference. So I wasn't sure exactly what he was talking about. I said, what do you mean? Egypt is a Muslim country like Bangladesh. There wouldn't be a dog? He said, no. The difference is the father would be talking over a mobile phone. But the point is, it is dangerous. Especially think about the monsoon season in India. Every day you have actual accidents, and the road crashes, fatalities are very high. But if something were to be happening, something to this family, what will happen to the children? It's not a society like Sweden, where we have social security. Regardless of what happens to the parents, children's future is guaranteed. It is not the case. So what happened was Ratan Tata in the early, like 2002, 2003, 2005, he came up. Ratan Tata is the chairman of Tata, the big Indian conglomerate Tata Group. His idea was, can I come up with a car which costs the same as a motorbike? And at that time, motorbike was about $2,000. So his challenge was, can I come up with a car which costs the same as a personal computer? At that time, a personal computer cost about $2,500. You know, personal computer used to cost about $2,500. And his idea was, can I make a car, not half a car, a real car, at $2,500? And at that time, none of the American manufacturers, none of the Japanese, none of the Germans, none of the Korean, none of the French thought it was possible. But Tata was able to do so without having a long history as an automobile company. Maybe that's the reason why it was able to do so. Through radically re-engineering car design, manufacturing and supply chain relationships, Tata delivered Nano, 1 lakh rupee, meaning as $2,500 car in 2009. So if one thing I would like to emphasize here is, usually when I work with companies and they want to grow in emerging markets, they understand people don't have the same income as people in Dusseldorf has or people in Osaka. So what their idea is, since you don't have as much money, let me start taking this thing off, taking this thing off, taking that thing off. So I would actually give you 30% value at 10% of the price, and you should be happy. That's not the way you should be doing it. You have to start from scratch. You cannot take an existing product and try to fit it. That's not how it works. You actually have to customize the product. And everybody knows it, but they don't do it. So you should ask why. The thing is, it was going to be the new Model T, you know, the Ford Model T, which revolutionized mobility. It was going to be the new Model T. But despite all the hype, unit sales have been low, soaking up a mere third of the company's 250,000 unit annual production capacity. Eventually, production was halted in May 2018. It was a great example of value innovation which the market did not accept. It was a flop in the market. Why do you think that was the case? Now, I often hear all kinds of things to my students. Some people say, maybe because roads were not there in India. Some people would say, maybe the most common answer is, people wanted car to be aspirational. This was seen as people's car, not aspirational. That is partially right, but not the main reason. Think about it this way. Don't you go to McDonald's? You do go to McDonald's. You know that when you go to McDonald's, exactly how much you're going to pay. So having something lower price does not mean people don't go there. The problem is, if the price is actually the same as a restaurant, but you are actually going to McDonald's, then you wonder, why would you go there? Now, in this car's case, because at the early stage of production, they had some production glitches, so things didn't work. So they had to send it back to the actual factory. That took time. So by the time it would come back, it would be like 3 weeks. And after everything is fixed, the price was not $2,500. The price was actually approaching about $3,500. So people thought, if I have to pay $3,500, why don't I actually pay $4,000, which is my next best option? And then it wouldn't be considered people's car. Now, again, the problem, if they had all those distribution channels, if they had all those repair shops nearby, the price would have been about $2,500. It would have the critical mass. It never reached the critical mass. Now, so innovation is not enough. And this is one of the things I would like you to understand. The second challenge is, how do you scale up value innovation? By reconfiguring the way value is delivered. Now, what does that mean? Let me give you an example. 66% of Indonesian population is either unbanked or underbanked. And 24% are millennials with smartphones. In the last 10 years or so, Indonesia, like China before, has made great progress in bringing people below the poverty line to the lower end of the middle class. Now, these people are often the people you would see working in Jakarta. If you go to Jakarta, they will be driving 𝐦𝐫𝐫𝐞 cars, 𝐦𝐫𝐫𝐞 motorbikes, or working in the central business district. The problem is they don't have bank accounts, many of them. So if they need to have some kind of immediate reason to get some kind of credit, who are they going to go to? Initially, they would go to their family members and friends, but very soon the family and friends wouldn't like to see them anymore. Then who would they go to? Loan sharks. Loan sharks are actually very happy to see them, because although it is a small amount of loan, it increases every day. Very soon, $1,000 loan could become $3,000. And most of the next 5-10 years, they would be just paying back the loan. So this is how they would never be able to remain in the middle class. They'll be back to the below the poverty line. So there was a great need in the banking sector for some kind of way to provide them credit. The problem is there is no data on them. So I want you to understand 𝐻𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐽. I wrote a case on this company, and what was their value proposition? What was the value innovation that they wanted to deliver? First of all, it has to be online, because people have mobile phone. So it has to be online. So it's an online lending portal providing unsecured loans through app. Now, the word I would like you to focus is unsecured. There is no collateral. You see, if you have collateral, then there is no problem. I can take your collateral if you can't pay. But they have no collateral, and they could be migrant moving from one place to the other. They can't give you proper address. So how would you actually be able to provide them? So this is one thing. It has to be online. Second, it has to be faster and more convenient than traditional banks. If I'm working as a motorcycle taxi driver, I don't have 3 hours to waste in a bank and filling up forms. So time is money. So it has to be faster and more convenient. Also, the longer installment and lower interest rate than those offered by loan sharks. So this is the idea. One thing I just wanted to remember I told you that Samsung basically was replaced by Xiaomi. Now Samsung came back with a slightly higher range, nicer phones. Remember I told you? One thing I didn't tell you, Samsung also had a very interesting app. Basically, this allowed people without fixed address to borrow the phone. So instead of actually selling the phone, they're lending the phone, and if they miss, it's like your house mortgage. If you miss, there is an app inside the phone that will basically lock the phone and stop them from making calls to outside. So you see, that's how they were able to increase the volume by getting people who were quite they wouldn't otherwise be able to do so. So this is, in this case, this is the value proposition. The problem is, how do you deliver this value? Very nice. If you were to be able to do this, people will come, they will get your app. But how? So you need a credit scoring algorithm. When you go to bank knows what is your risk profile. That's based on that, they will decide what interest to charge you. The problem is, there is no data about these people. Absolutely no data. So how are you going to decide who to give loan, who not to give loan to? You know what? They did something very interesting. This is Vishal Tulsian. He's the CEO of 𝐻𝐶𝐚𝐫𝐽. He said, we gave out blind loans, then we could get the data. In a manufacturing business, the capital cost is put in the machines. In this knowledge economy, the capital cost will be the need to collect data and burn some money. So it's actually, the idea is very simple. You don't have any data, go and get your own data. Now, how would you do so? They decided to provide, they kept their own money, a pot of money, and they started giving blind loans, to maybe 100 people. And first 20 people, some paid, some didn't pay. So you have the data about them, who paid and who didn't pay. Use that data to predict next round, and you get data and use that to predict next round. And they were able to reach a point where the predicted rate of default was actually 1% of the actual rate of default. So they created their own data. When you go to emerging markets like Indonesia, when you go to emerging markets in Bangladesh, when you go to emerging markets in Philippines, you don't have the data that you would have in many other countries. And without the data, things look risky. Of course, you're not going to be able to succeed. So you have to spend some creative ideas about how to get the data. I want you to meet Dr. Devi Shetty. He is often called the Henry Ford of heart surgery. He started by providing pediatric heart surgery to children. I used to go there every year for a couple of years, bringing the senior most executives from some of the Japanese companies to Bangalore, where this hospital is, to show to innovation to succeed. It doesn't have to be very expensive. It doesn't need to have a lot of patents, but it could actually add a lot of value. Now, if you look at this, average cost of open heart surgery at Narayana Health at Narayana Hospital is about $2,000. For a US research hospital, is $100,000. Now, how is it possible? $2,000 versus $100,000? How is it possible? Now, you know, it's not like you provide somebody 80% value at 20% of the price. You cannot tell, you know, I'll give you a heart which works 80% of the time. Either it works or it doesn't work. Now, what was the secret of their success? I want you to understand what's going on. Basically, they realized India, like most emerging markets, has a huge demand, but very limited number of doctors. Think about how many doctors India would have. 15,000? These are very highly specialized surgeons, right? Maybe, 20,000? But you're talking about 1.4 billion people. So how do you make doctors more productive? The way to do so would be hire very trained nurses. Basically, they do most of the work, but doctors only do the operation, move from one table to the other. Because in order for you to do the operations, you have to have the license that only surgeon can have. And that license takes 7-8 years to get. Whereas nurse, maybe 2 years. It is expensive, but a lot cheaper than to have a doctor. So this is how a doctor in Narayana would have 400 operations at a time, when an operation in the surgeon in America or some other places would have maybe 100. Now, if a surgeon has 400 operations under her experience, wouldn't you consider that person to be more experienced? That's exactly why the quality level of Narayana Heart Hospital is at the same level as the top 3 heart hospitals in the world. One is in Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, one is in Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, Cleveland, another one is in Mass General Hospital in Boston. So it is at the same level. So it is $2,000. What was the price again? It's $2,000. Doesn't mean that it is actually poor quality. If anything, it's among the best, because they're doing many experiences. Same thing. So what did 𝐻𝐸𝐾 and Narayana have in common? Do you see, in the case of Nano, they had the value innovation, but they didn't do the business system innovation. In the case of Narayana, they did both. In the case of 𝐻𝐸𝐾, you did both. So you need to combine the value innovation with business system innovation. So it's not enough to think about a value proposition that customers are willing to pay for it. You also need to think about how to deliver it to them in the most efficient way. You need to think about that. And I want you to think for a second. In June 2022, about 27.4 million people, or 8.3% of Americans, were uninsured. Now, what does that mean? It means this kind of solution that you see happening in countries like India, countries like Bangladesh, countries like Indonesia, where we have huge demand, very limited supply. They are making the very efficient use of resources. Is one day going to be used in the most rich countries in the world, because their budget is increasing, their healthcare budget. This is a problem for them. People are getting older. So this is an example for innovation which happens at the developing countries, actually somehow helping people in the rich countries also. And I want you to know this is exactly what happened. Narayana Heart Hospital, I was just telling you about, they set up a hospital in Cayman Islands, the Grand Cayman, which is about 70 miles from Miami. So the idea is, if they couldn't set it up in the US, because in the US the regulation has a lot of entry barriers for outside hospitals to coming in. You have to ask why. You have to ask why. Why are there entry barriers if it is good? I'll let you think about this. But the idea here was they could set it up in Grand Cayman, and anybody who would come to Florida, Miami, they would fly them in, and it's included in the operation cost. Even if the cost would be so much cheaper. And this is why eventually this is going to be the way forward, because it's high quality, lower price. And if you look at this, this is why some people say reverse innovation. For the last 200 years, think about most of the innovations that we're familiar with. Phone, automobiles, airplane. They moved, refrigerators moved from the rich country to the not so rich countries, bottom of the pyramid. Right now, there's a reverse innovation. Because we have the critical mass in these countries, you also have the critical mass of, you have the need, the customers, you have the doctors, you have the ideas. That's why the solutions, experiments that would be successful here will basically eventually be brought back to the developed countries. Actually, it's quite familiar to you. Think about BYD. Why is it that China is a leader in EV? Because it could start from the scratch. It was not a leader in internal combustion things, but it had a horrible pollution problem. So it wanted to go something clean energy, and there was an opportunity. It could start from the scratch. So this is the potential for many, many different areas. And this is not the first time. If I were to ask you, name the #1 global appliance brand, I think most of you would know. It was Haier. It's Haier. Before Haier, it was GE Appliance, which is now a Haier company. If I ask you which is the #1 tractor company in the world, you might say John Deere. It's not John Deere. It's actually Mahindra and Mahindra. Mahindra and Mahindra is an Indian company which actually went to India, went to the US and became the #1 best-selling tractor in the world. I want you to think what it means, because it is not that easy to pronounce Mahindra and Mahindra. And John Deere is considered part of the American fabric. Generations after generations in the last century, they used John Deere. Even the die-hard supporters of this buy American culture are willing to buy Mahindra. Why? Because it satisfies their need. The same way people in America buy Toyota car. There was a time they were like, why would anybody buy Toyota, these small cars? Now with energy efficiency things and the other needs, people are buying Toyota cars. Same thing, this is an opportunity. But on the other hand, if you fail to win in these markets, you would be disrupted in your home market. But success is not impossible. Now, this is a brand some of you might know. It's the company which is behind Mami Poco brand. They make the diapers, for children's diapers. Now, Japanese companies, like German companies, like French, like US companies, find it quite difficult to grow in developing markets, emerging markets. But this company is very successful. It did very well in China. It did very well. It's now is having a little bit of difficult time, but it has done very well in Africa, India, Indonesia. How did they do so well? So, lesson 1, localize, localize, localize. So I just want to give you one personal anecdotal experience. I interviewed Mr. Takahara. Takahara-san, his headquarters is in Shinagawa in Tokyo. I went to interview him about maybe 2014. I was 9 years younger. Oh, 10 years younger. So I was a little bit 10 years less mature. So what happened was I asked him, so Mr. Takahara, give me some examples of innovations that you brought especially for emerging markets. Then he said, yes, I can give you one. In India, we came up with female hygiene products with antibacterial cream. Now, I have never used female hygiene products, so I don't really know. So I asked him, Takahara-san, is it something that you also have in Japan, or was it meant specifically for India or Bangladesh? So his answer was, in Japan, if you say that if you publicize as antibacterial cream, Japanese women won't buy it. They will be insulted. So when he said that to me, I didn't really understand what he meant. And I was, as I told you, I was 10 years immature before. So before even I could think what I heard, something came out from my, I couldn't have enough filter. I said, Takahara-san, are you saying people in my part of the world are not so clean? And he started laughing. He said, Pasha-san, when was the last time you went to a public bathroom in your own country? I thought for a second, then I thought for 2 seconds, then I thought for 3 seconds. Maybe the last time was when I was 5 years old or 6 years old, when I went to a zoo, public zoo. Then he said, in your country, like many other emerging markets, women are coming out to work like garments. Now, when they go to work, there are no bathrooms for women, which is very close by. So often they have to walk a little bit to go to the bathroom, which is sometimes not so private, not so safe. They have to pass by gawking men. So they try not to go. When they come home, they live with extended family, with brother-in-laws, brothers. Again, they don't want to spend as much time in the bathroom. So they want to reduce their time in the bathroom. That's why they don't change. Now, if you understand that, that's why we thought about antibacterial cream. Then I said, how did you figure that thing out? He said something very interesting. He said, I asked my engineers, my people, to go to people's house. I want to see what kind of utensils they use, what kind of bathrooms they go to, what kind of living room do they live, so that I can solve their problem. He said, if I open my curtain in Shinagawa, I cannot see how a mother lives in Jakarta or in Dhaka. So this is why, in order to localize, you have to actually put boots on the ground. You have to be there. And that leads to my second point. Localization means more than just setting up R&D lab. Nokia, so you see Samsung, when they displaced Nokia in India, one thing Samsung did, which was very interesting. What Samsung did, they actually brought the entire global R&D for feature phone to India. Whereas South Koreans would, in Seoul, they would be focusing only on the smartphone R&D. This was understandable in some respect because the mobile market was migrating from feature phone to smartphone, right? So they decided that this feature phone related things would be done where the customers are in India, where the smartphone would be done in where the customers in South Korea. But it took a lot of courage because at that time, most of Samsung Mobile's revenues were still coming from feature phone. So when they did, and it was a great success, and when Nokia saw that Samsung made a great success, what did Nokia do? They brought their R&D lab too, but it was a big failure. Why? I want you to understand something very important. Why do strategies fail? First reason, poor alignment. Now, what does the word poor alignment mean? Also resist the change, not communicated to all these things, but I want you to think about the poor alignment. When you have a strategy, let's say I want to grow my business in Indonesia, first question you should ask, who should I hire? Who should I hire to grow my business? Somebody from Shanghai? Somebody from Delhi? No. You have to hire somebody who understands the market. Just because I understand Delhi or Shanghai doesn't mean I will understand Surabaya. So you have to hire top talents from Indonesia. Now, who are these top talents? Let's assume they're from Bandung Institute of Technology or University of Gadjah Mada or University of Indonesia, top 3 universities. Let's say you hire them, okay? But you have to always ask, why should they work for me? They have choices too, right? Why should they work for me? Now, this is again, I want to tell you an interesting story. I asked the same question to the president of Samsung India. I wrote a case of Samsung. So how did you get the top Indian engineers to join? You know what? He said something very interesting. He said, we tell them, if you join Samsung, we will give you challenging jobs. It's not like we will give you more money. Of course, they pay well, but so do Siemens. So does, HP pays well too. Google too. So their point is, if you join here, you will have an opportunity to shine. You know, the word shine is not necessarily very common in many parts of the world which is developed. When I was growing up in Bangladesh, my parents will tell you, if you don't want to study, your life would be like what you see outside. Do you like what you see? So the average is not so good. Then you have to try to basically better than the average. You want to shine. You want to stand out. And this was an opportunity for Indian engineers to actually show what they're made of. So they like challenges. So you have to understand the context, what people want. This is one. But let's say you got the best people from Indonesia. But all these people, they realize most of the actual decisions that take during lunch, during evening drinking sessions, which Muslims don't usually drink, or during golf outing on Saturday, Sundays. Now, if you think about this, they are there, but they are out of the internal networks. Nobody shares anything interesting to them. Now, it's not that others are, people are prejudiced that they don't want to. It's just they want to speak in their own language. They have been speaking whole day in Korean or Chinese or Japanese or German. Now they want to basically let loose and try to chill. The point is, what bring them together, cohesive bond, it is not going to what will bring them close together to the others. But it's the others who, without them, you wouldn't be able to reach the customers you need. So you need to change the process. So if you change the process because you change the people, you ask yourself about the structure. If all these young people who are now bright people who are now working for you, and they also have the information because you're progressive enough to share information with them, they realize actually whatever they say doesn't matter. All the decisions are actually being made outside. They have no autonomy. Very soon they'll be frustrated and they will leave. Why? Because they can. That's why. You'll be stuck with people who can't leave. And finally, think about this way. You got the people right, you got the process right, you got the structure right. How about the rewards? How about the rewards? I want you to think for a second. Everybody, all my clients these days, especially banks, they talk about digital transformation. How does a traditional bank change itself? Well, we want to hire people who would want to work for Google. Very nice, but why do they want to work for you? Are you going to give them something which is like Google, where you can eat all kinds of nice food, you can have nice fancy looking sofas and things like that? You can come at 10 a.m. and leave until 10 p.m. Or if you expect them to dress like me every day, that's not going to work. So you have to understand the incentives have to match. So this is what I mean. This is hard. This is actually hard. Because why? Every time you want to change the kind of people you want to hire. Think about the kind of processes you want to hire. Think about incentives. Let's say you want to move from seniority to merit-based. Do you think everybody will be happy? If you want to change something at NUS, where I have been here for 25 years, do you think I'll be happy? Because I've been here for 24 years. I worked so hard here, and you're going to change the goalpost now? Of course not. The challenge that companies face, I find, is not that they don't understand what they need to do, but they cannot change because they actually ignore that whenever you're going to make some changes, some people will benefit, some people will lose. Now, those who will lose, can you fire them? If you do, like in the case of like startups, very good. But most of the time you can't. You need them to do their job well so that you can do other things. But they will sabotage you, or they will do lip service. Why should they work if it is not good for them? So, if you want to make changes, make sure that you have something to give to those who have something to lose. Otherwise, it will not happen. I want you to understand that. And this is the difficult part. What I said until now is intellectual, easy. But the difficult part is this part. So lesson 2, you need to have the courage to realign your human capital, processes, structure, and incentives. You have to have the courage, okay? And the empathy. The last mini quiz, okay? I want you to think for a second. Which Asian country is the fastest growing major economy? I think, since you might think about different countries in your mind, I'll give you a hint. In the last World Cup, They defeated Argentina. Any idea? Well, let me show you. Do you know which one? Saudi Arabia. Now, let me ask you, did you consider Saudi Arabia as part of Asia? You didn't, but it's in the Asian Cup. They play football. We didn't consider it part of Asia because we think about Asia as only trade that takes part between Southeast Asia and East Asia. But that's not how it has always been. How do you think Indonesia had originally culture changed? Islam came from West Asia to Indonesia. There was a very long trade route between Middle East, which is we call Middle East, West Asia, to basically East Asia. And how did, if you look at the history, paper go from China to Baghdad? From Baghdad, it was basically all over the Muslim world, and then to Europe. So we have to ask ourselves, by the way, this is, if you see, this is called NEOM. NEOM is the line, 160 kilometer long. It's a city. It is supposed to be 170 kilometer long, 500 meter tall, and 200 meter wide, from the middle of the desert all the way to the Red Sea. It's kind of examples like this of the new ambition of Saudi Arabia. Whether it will succeed or not, that I do not know. But the point is, look at Dubai. Now, if you don't see these places as opportunities grow, because you don't even look at them, then you will miss out. So this is why my lesson number 3, be ready to fight your perceptions. How you see Asia may open or close your door to the future. I give you a little bit of a challenge. Ask yourself, what's the GDP of Bangladesh? Ask yourself, write it down, and then after you finish this program, go and check in Google. Okay? Do that. So this, I want you to understand. We are almost close to the end. This is dodo. This is Charles Darwin. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. So as you leave this program today, I want you to seriously ask yourselves, which one of your perceptions and biases need to be unlearned, left behind, and which aspects of your organizations need to be altered for you to succeed in emerging Asia? Think hard. Thank you.